Hey everybody, Ninja Cupcake here, and welcome to this Photoshop tutorial. So we're gonna get started here by opening up our picture, which is gonna be down here in our libraries. We just click on it, right click on the JPEG file, and open with. And if you open up that pull down menu, we're gonna open it up with Adobe Photoshop CC 2017. Which is pretty standard. A lot of digital programs are pretty similar to Photoshop, so look for your tools that are most similar to mine and try and match it up as best you can if you don't have Photoshop. Alright, so here is our image. It's scanned from a piece of printer paper. As you can tell, it's a little bit gray. So what we're going to do is change our color to white. First, we're going to go here to this Layers tab. Double click on this background layer and then push OK, and that sets the layer to a normal layer just like any other. And we're going to go up here to Image, and then we're going to change the mode to grayscale just so we can get rid of any extra color that's in the drawing. Discard, and there we go, now it's in grayscale. And then we go to Image again, Adjustments, Brightness/Contrast, and then we just adjust the brightness until we can't see any more gray. So just go up here and select a hard, round, pressure-sensitive brush. So as a reference point, we're going to add a dollop of white just in the upper corner of our drawing, right up here. Then we go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness/Contrast, and then just crank the brightness up all the way until you can't tell the difference between the gray background and the white dollop that you just placed. Push OK, and we're going to go to our Layers tab again. We're going to change the mode to Multiply, and right there. And we're going to right click and click Duplicate Layer right there. That'll give us some of the black in that line work back, and just keep doing it again and again until you can see all of that black. Once you feel like your line work's dark enough, select all the layers, right click, and then click Merge Layers right here. Then we go back to Image, and we go back to Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast, and just rinse and repeat. And now that we're finished darkening our line work, just name this layer Sketch right here. And what we're going to do next is go into our color right here. Just click on that square, make sure it's all the way white. Push OK. And we're going to go in and we're going to doctor some of our line work with the white brush, just getting rid of any specks that you see, any smudges, anything that's out of place. Alright, now that we're done doctoring our line work, we're going to go back into Image, just double check that it's still in grayscale because it's really important for this part to be in grayscale. So go and click on your Channels tab right here, which is right under your layers. See that gray tab right there? What we're going to do is select our Magic Wand tool right up here. We're going to hold down the Control button, or Command if you're using a Mac, and just click on it. And that selects all of the white pixels in our image. So what we're going to go do then, close that, we're going to right click, and then we're going to select Inverse. Now that we have our selection in place, what we're going to do is add a new layer, which is this button right here. Rename it Line Work. And use our Paint Bucket tool, which is right here, and just fill it in with black. And I accidentally had white selected and I couldn't push Ctrl Z to undo it, so just go here to your history bar, push the delete button, and hit enter. That just gets rid of extra mistakes that you make, just in case you can't hit Ctrl Z more than once. Alright, now that we're done with that, just go ahead and select your lasso tool right here and click anywhere on the canvas to deselect your image. Go to your Layers tab, hide the sketch layer, and you have yourself an isolated piece of line work from a scanned image. So what we're going to do next is go to Image, Mode, and change it back to Color, because we definitely want to color this image later. Now that we have our image back in RGB color again, we're going to go into our Layers tab. We're going to click the New Layer button, drag it to the bottom, rename it Background, and we're going to fill it with white. Now that we have our white background, go ahead and click Image again. We're going to go to Canvas Size, and we're going to change our canvas size to 11 by 14. Push OK. And it's alright if it takes some time to load. Alright, so once it's loaded, it should look something like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new background layer so that our transparent edges are gone and it's all completely filled in with white. And now we have a background layer to work with in our 11 by 14 size. So just unhide your line work layer. And what we're going to do now is we're going to free transform it so we can make it bigger. So select your lasso tool right here and then just trace all the way around the line work with the lasso tool so you have a nice selection of what you want to free transform. So real quick before we make this any bigger, what we're going to do is select the inverse right here. Then we're just going to push delete just so we can get rid of any smudges we might have missed. Just use the Move tool to refine our selection of our line work. Then we right click, free transform, and fit it to the size of the canvas. Once we've got our line work in place, it's time to refine it. Zoom in real close with our pencil tool brush, which is just going to be in our brush list right down here. And this is where you can really get creative. You don't have to use the same brush I did, but you can if you'd like. There are lots of different kinds of brushes in Photoshop, Paint Tool, Sai, and all other kinds of programs. Experiment, have fun with it. Alright, so now we have our textured line work to work with. So what we're going to do next is add all of our base layers for our clipping mask. Clipping masks is kind of like locking the transparent pixels. You might have seen this in my How to Draw Rose tutorial, but with clipping masks you can actually do this on separate layers, so it's really helpful and saves a lot of time. Add a layer for each item that needs colored in, so in this case I did the hair, dress, skin, harp, and other accessories like the bracelet and her hair pieces. Once you have all of your layers, go ahead and close that tab and pick a really bright color that you're probably not going to be working with in your finished drawing. In my case, I picked this really bright purple that I later changed to a hot pink. Once you've got your clipping mask's base color, go back to your brushes and select that pressure sensitive brush that we've been using earlier. This one right here. Make it a couple hundred pixels big and just start going at the colors. Don't even worry about coloring inside the lines. We'll get to that later. Once you've got at least one of your clipping masks filled in, it's time to add something else. This is called the gray screen. It's what I use to help myself color. First, select your color and set it to 30, 30, 30. This will give you a nice gray tone. Then, grab your paint bucket tool and just fill in the layer. What I usually use this for is when I'm coloring, I want to erase stuff, but I can still see bits and pieces of color that I missed, so the gray screen helps me catch those. The bright purple, or hot pink, stands out against the gray background. Now that we've got our clipping mask layer in place, it's time to start erasing. Scale your brush down to a little bit smaller of a size, closer to 40, if you're working at 600 dpi. Use an eraser at around 20. Zoom on in and erase everything outside the lines. For those of you who want to go the extra mile in refining your line work, here's how to do it. First, you make a separate inking layer above the sketch layer that you already have, and then set the sketch layer to around 50 or 40% opacity. This will give it a nice gray look, and it'll be easier to ink over your drawing. Another important trick to note is the hand rotation tool. This tool allows you to rotate your image and gives you the feeling of holding a piece of paper in your hand and turning it as you work on it. You can always reset your view right there. Another important tool to note is flipping the canvas horizontal. This is really helpful, and it gives you that feeling of walking away from your canvas for a few hours and then coming back to a different looking piece of artwork. It gives you a new perspective and helps you make other adjustments to make your artwork more symmetrical. Alright, so I've added all of my clipping masks, and here's what they all look like against the gray screen. Here's what they look like when you erase them. This is approximately what you're aiming for. Make sure you erase outside the lines as much as possible. Up next, we're going to add a stroke effect to the line work. Go ahead and click that FX on the bottom that you see right there, and click Stroke. This little menu should come up. Your settings should be set up like this, so take a closer look. Pause if you have to. What this does is help us see even more little specks of dust that we might have missed. If you zoom in real close, you can see little blue dots as I try and go in and erase all of the unwanted line work. Zoom in as close as you can and erase any blue specks that you might see. It's important to take this step because it helps your line work look even cleaner than before. Once your line work is all cleaned up, it's time to get rid of that stroke effect. Just go into your menu and click that little delete button you see on the bottom right hand corner of the scroll down menu. And now it's time to add all of the base colors to your clipping masks. What you're going to want to do is create a new layer right above the color that you want to start working on. For me, I'm going to start with this hair layer. Click the new layer button down at the bottom, drag the layer over top of the clipping mask you want to do, right click and click this Create Clipping Mask button right there. And you're all set. I renamed the layer to Hair 1 just to keep it organized. Next, it's time to choose your base color. In this case, Zelda's hair is blonde, so I'm going to pick a nice golden yellow. It's going to be most effective to use a really big brush for this part, so go ahead and have at it. What comes next is pretty simple. It's mostly just to keep all of your things organized. What you're going to want to do is grab your hair layer and your hair base and group them together with this button right here. Group from layers. Name it hair and then push OK. Feel free to go through and do the same thing with all of your other layers. Just select them both, right click, and then group them up. Now that we have all of our bases, we're going to start adding shading. I have 3 different brushes that I use for shading. A big soft brush, a smaller harder brush, and then a medium brush that I edit with the blur tool. Each of these brushes provide an effect for soft cell shading. So what we're going to do first is add the darker tones. Grab your base color and then move it down and to the right to create a darker, more saturated tone to go along with it, and then push OK. Contour around the edges with a big, soft brush. This will give the layer the 3D kind of effect that we're going for. A nice soft shade. For each shading style, make sure you add a new layer and make sure you right click it and create the clipping mask to go along with the base that you created a while back. This will make sure that you have separation between your different types of shades and will give you the freedom to change the opacity of each layer as well. This is about what your finished skin tone should look like. Soft shading in certain areas and cell shading in others. For example, the strings on the harp. I use cell shading for that rather than soft because it has a direct shadow on it. Adding reflection is pretty easy too. All you need to do is move it up and to the left to create a lighter and less saturated tone to use for reflecting. And always remember that you're working with the right layer. It would be pretty disappointing to work on reflection in a shading layer. Shading hair in an anime art style is pretty similar to shading the skin, so this is what the finished product should look like. We're going to do something a little bit different though. Anime hairstyles often have a halo reflection, or at least that's what I call it, which is a straight line right across the rim of their hair to give that nice 3D effect. This is how you do it. Just swoop in with a really light color and erase what you don't want to see. Then change the opacity of the layer just to make it cooperate with the shadows. Another thing that's different about an anime hairstyle is the glow effect on the tips of the hair. What you're going to want to do is get your large, soft brush and go around the tips of the edge with almost a white color. Do this at the tip of every bit of hair, including the bangs. This gives the ends a little bit of a glowy effect, and it helps the hair stand out more and look a little bit more reflective and shiny. Make sure to lower the opacity though, you don't want to look like you gave them frosted tips. Now that we've covered the bases of shading and reflection, it's time to talk about transparency inking. What we're going to do is take the darkest shade of what we're working on, the hair, and make it even darker and more saturated. Then go to your line work layer, block the transparent pixels, zoom in, and start inking over the hair. This will make the line work a little less harsh and blend the hair together way better. Sometimes it'll help to edit other layers or go back to your base layer while you're doing this. Zooming in so close and inking so carefully can help you see mistakes that you might have missed. Now that we've gone through and transparently inked everything, we're going to talk about shading clothing. Just go in here to your dress base or any clothing base that you might be working on. Create your clipping mask and rename it accordingly. What's nice about shading clothing is it doesn't need all that hard cell shading in order to give it that finished look. So just grab your color selection tool, grab your color base for your clothes, and then create a darker, more saturated tone for your shades. We're going to grab our brush tool, make it really big, and use that soft shade that we've been working with. Change the opacity right here to about 40%. This will help you give a little bit more control about what's darkest and what's lightest. And then go ahead and shade accordingly. Make sure you change the hardness of your eraser too, and the opacity of it, just to keep a consistency. Reflection with clothes works about the same way. Go ahead and grab your color picker and then make it up and to the left to make a less saturated and lighter tone. Go ahead and add reflection in the appropriate areas using the same opacity technique. Once all of your layers are isolated, they should look something like this. Go ahead and edit any reflection that you may see because it's hard to tell with such light colors. Now that we're done with shading and reflection on the clothes, it's time to transparently ink it. Make sure you set your opacity back to 100% and choose that hard pressure sensitive brush that we've been using earlier. Take your darkest tone and make it even darker. Now it's time to move on to the next step, which is shading and coloring all of our metallic objects and other things that are a bit glossier than clothes or hair. We're going to start with the harp in this drawing, so go ahead and create a new layer in the appropriate clipping mask group. Shading metallic objects is a lot like shading skin. You need a lot of hard cell shading in order to make it work. Make sure you pay attention to different lighting effects and shadows in your drawing. For example, her hair right here. I put the shadow on the harp. I also put the shadow of her arm. We're going to add the glow effect just like we did on the dress before. Make sure the opacity of your brush is set down about 40%. After that, we're going to add the hard cell shaded reflections. Give it a little bit of a stripey feel because metallic objects often reflect stripe. Next, we're going to add the darker tones with a soft cell brush. It's going to be a lot smaller than what we've been dealing with, so it contours a little bit more sharply. but still soft. For this one, we're going to focus a little bit more on glow than shadow. We're going to add more glow effects, a little less shadowing, but still have it there. And we're going to have a lot more hard cell shaded reflection. This is about what your finished drawing should look like, using all the shading and reflecting techniques that we talked about. Next, we're going to be working on the background. The gradient tool right here is definitely helpful for that. So I already have a gradient kind of preset in the pastels pack of all the gradients that already come with Photoshop, but I'm going to edit it a little bit to my needs. So just double click on the gradient, and then you can click on any of the colors to adjust them to your liking. Once you're decided on your colors, make sure that you've set your gradient to a linear gradient right here. Once you've done that, just draw a straight line up and through the center of your drawing. What we're going to draw next is clouds, since Zelda in this game takes place in Skyward Sword, so it's only fitting to draw the sky, and skies have clouds. So what we're going to do is we're going to hide everything else so we can get a clear view of our background right here. Go to our brushes and scroll all the way down the list until you can find this brush right here. This is pressure sensitive to color, so make sure you choose two colors that are really light. I chose a lighter gray and just kept the other one at white. So let's change the size of it and use our pressure tablet to our advantage to create some lovely textured clouds. Now that all of our clouds are done, what we're going to do is change the opacity of them so they look a little bit more like clouds and not like big balls of cotton floating in the sky. Next, we're going to add a little bit of a glow effect to our clouds, so create a new layer, name it Mist, because it gives it a little bit of a misty effect, then select your big, pressure-sensitive, soft brush. Once you've added the glow effect to the cloud, go ahead and lower the opacity of the layer. Lower it to around 10 or 15, just to give it a glow instead of a white fuzz. Now that we have our sky, we're going to add a little bit of a nature effect. We're not going to add the ground necessarily, we're just going to add a couple of leaves using this brush right here. Go ahead and select your color, change it to a lighter green, and get it started. So this brush is pressure sensitive to cluster size, so go ahead and make it bigger and push really light right around the bottom of the drawing just to give it a big pile of leaves right there. Push harder if you want the leaves to be closer together. Alright, so once you're done, your background should look a little something like this. So what we're going to do next is add some lens flare. So go up here, right here to Filter, click on that, scroll down all the way to Render, open that pull down menu, and then click on Lens Flare. This little menu should come up. There are different brightnesses and filter styles, so play around with it until you like it. I'm going to choose this first one and leave the brightness to around here. Make sure you render your lens flare onto your gradient layer. Alright, and with that we are done. Go ahead and add your signature to a separate layer and lock the transparent pixels to change it to a color that blends in but still stands out. Alright, and this is our finished picture rendered in 300 dpi in our Photoshop file. We learned all about how to get a scanned image into line art and how to trace line art and color and shade and do a bunch of different background effects. And I think that's everything I can cover in this video. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!